Hello everyone. Today's video is about many things related to mold testing, and if I have time I'll get to another question on candida and antibiotic use. As per usual, nothing I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, please talk to a healthcare provider to get that advice. So, question says here, let's see here. Okay, okay, sorry, the person said a few nice things, so thank you for the feedback. So it says, question about mold. I've heard that you're in, that, I guess maybe autocorrect or voice correct anyways, that urine tests are not the most, spelled Y-O-U''RE space I-N. Anyways, urine tests are not the most accurate to see how much mold is in your body because it's not all mold. Because not all mold will readily leave the body through urine. Oftentimes it's not excreted. Is this true? I've also heard some people say urine tests are the most accurate. What is the most accurate way to know if you're harboring mold? I have a gene that makes it harder to detox mold, the HLA gene, as well as MTHFR. Thank you for the question. And when it comes to urine mycotoxin testing, they are, to my knowledge, like definitely not perfect tests. And it is true, to my understanding, that there are some folks where their detox pathways are so clogged up, gummed up, that you're going to get a false negative with the urine mycotoxin test. So, you do the test and nothing comes out in the urine. It's like, oh, I guess I don't have mold. It's like, well, not necessarily. That's why with my patients, I ask them to do a sweating provocation ahead of time. So the night before they collect their sample, they sweat for 20 or 30 minutes, either actively or passively inducing that sweating, i.e. through a sauna or being in a very warm place, or doing some type of exercise. Now, many of my patients are not able to do the type of exercise that would be required to get themselves sweating for 20 to 30 minutes, so passive sweat's a better option. And then I have some patients who say, if I go in a sauna, I do anything to make myself sweat, I'm going to feel awful, so then we just skip that step. Or maybe we'll do like a little 5-minute sweat or something like that. So it's not a hard and fast rule for all of my patients, but by doing the sweating provocation, in my experience, that seems to really minimize the likelihood of having a false negative result. In years gone by, I didn't do the sweating provocation, and I had a number of patients, like maybe, I don't know, a dozen or so cases over the years where like just nothing came out, and it's like, you're like living in mold right now. Like we know there's mold, or we do like a sinus culture and find mold there. It's like, how is this test negative? And then we treated them, they got better. It's like, okay, this clearly must have been a false negative. Once we started doing the sweating provocation, I believe from my observations that the false negative rate has really just gone through the floor. Like it's just I think it's pretty much antidote to that. I think that's anyways, I think it's an important recommendation that I make for my patients when asking them to prep for this test. Now, with that being said, there's also the concern about the other end of the spectrum, where maybe a urine mycotoxin test is going to give false positives, and maybe the mycotoxins that are being picked up there are actually reflections of dietary or dietary exposures. And so that's a reason that I recommend to my patients that they avoid common mold-contaminated or mycotoxin-contaminated foods, so that it minimizes the chances of us seeing a false positive or a false elevated result. So for my patients, for a couple of days before they do the test, they're avoiding things like grains and nuts and seeds and chocolate and coffee, and just like basically foods that are known to be more likely to be mold contaminated. So I feel like that's about as much of an insurance policy as I can get that is going to help to minimize the false positive rate. With that being said, there is some compelling research evidence to suggest that the amounts of mycotoxins that come up in urine samples is heavily variable from day to day, and that with mycotoxin repeat testing, that the value of that test is questionable to say, like, okay, if I had, say, an ochratoxin level that's 50 today, and then I'm treated for 2 months, and then my level comes back at a 35, it's like, oh good, like my level is coming down. There is question as to whether that's actually a statistically significant difference. And the research literature that I've been exposed to suggests that the number probably has to drop quite a bit more than that in that particular case. The 50 might need to go down to, like, say, a maybe a 20 or 15 or less for it to actually be considered a significantly positive change, or a significantly different change, I should say. So there is definitely there are definitely some things to be. Urine mycotoxin testing is definitely not perfect. There are certain things that I think are limitations of the testing. With that being said, I do use it in clinical practice because I think that it is valuable to see at the very least whether mold seems to be on the table, and then also to see whether there seems to be a catastrophically high number of mycotoxins or whether it's relatively modest amount. I had a patient the other day, her ochratoxin came back at a 342 after doing a good prep. It's like, wow, that is a colossal amount. Or if we see, say mycotoxins that are indicative of Stachybotrys or Chitonium, it's like, oh, like that's really nasty toxic mold. Like we should not be seeing that like from food exposure or something like that. It's like that's I think very, very valuable information to have. So even if there are some limitations with using urine mycotoxin tests for, say, tracking patient progress and this and that, I think as long as we're aware of the loop or the pitfalls around like false positives, false negatives, some of the limitations with using it to track progress over time, I think it's a valuable test. So I do recommend it for my patients, but I absolutely acknowledge that it has limitations. And there are some clinicians out there in certain camps that say like it's just absolutely like nonsense testing, not useful at all. So I'm not surprised that you've heard things to suggesting that maybe it's not a useful test. So I'll just quickly comment as well on the MTHFR status. So if a person does have MTHFR mutations, it's not something to my knowledge that is predictive of whether someone's going to have mold issues or not. If we have significant mutations in MTHFR, certainly impacts our methylation capacity, and that could certainly make us more susceptible to developing mold illness because we won't be able to potentially produce glutathione as much, and we need glutathione to metabolize a lot of mold toxins. So it might make us a bit more of a sitting duck, at least to become mold toxic. We can't get rid of those mycotoxins as easily, but in and of itself, it's really not directly predictive of whether one's dealing with mold or not. I've had plenty of patients with homozygous MTHR mutations at the C677T location, like i.e. the most important location on that gene, that if double mutated means that the resultant enzyme, to my knowledge, is only functioning at 30% of optimal capacity, and many of those patients feel totally fine. They're not all living in mold necessarily, but it's not like having that double homozygous mutation is a guarantee that there's going to be notable symptoms or notable health issues going on. I think I covered everything there. Yeah, and I guess maybe just the one little thing, like, and it might be just a semantics, but just for the sake of clarification, part of the question was, are these tests the most accurate to see how much mold is in your body? Because not all mold will readily leave the body through urine. I mean, the one thing to clarify there is that when we're doing these mycotoxin tests, they're measuring mycotoxin levels, not mold. So, we test ochratoxin in the urine, which we know is produced primarily by Aspergillus species mold, telling us that maybe there's Aspergillus in the environment, or maybe it's colonized the sinuses or the lungs, maybe the gut. Or if we see mycophenolic acid in the urine, that's a mycotoxin that's produced by Penicillium species mold, and so then that tells us like, oh, we found mycophenolic acid in the urine, so therefore there appears to be this Penicillium overgrowth or exposure. So just a maybe semantics thing, but like we're not looking for mold in the urine, and like the reason we don't look for mold in the urine is because mold is too big to get into the bloodstream. It's compared to mycotoxins, it's gigantic. So yes, it can colonize the sinuses, in some cases colonize the lungs, some limited research to show it can colonize the gut, but it's not going to get into the urine because it just can't get into the blood in the first place, and our kidneys filter our blood to create our urine. So anyways, maybe semantics, but just wanted to clarify that if someone's like, you can't find mold in urine, it's like, you're darn straight you can't, unless, I don't know, the container that was holding the urine was contaminated with mold or something like that, but it's looking for mycotoxins produced by mold. I'm going to leave it there for now. Any questions or comments on this topic, please post in the comment section below. And if you don't mind taking a quick moment to please like, share, subscribe, and or post a quick comment on the video, I would really appreciate it. So thanks in advance for taking a second to do that.